Dzień dobry wszystkim. Witam uczestników kolejnego z spotkań wirtualnych z programem English Teaching i Instalink. To kolejne z webinariów, które organizujemy wspólnie jako program English Teaching Polsko-Amerykańskiej Fundacji Wolności i Instalink, system do nauczania i uczenia się języka angielskiego. Dzisiaj z nami przez najbliższe 60 minut będzie pani Marta Bujakowska, która będzie opowiadać o fińskim systemie edukacyjnym, który, jak powszechnie wiadomo, jest uważany za jeden z najlepszych na świecie. Szkolnictwo w Finlandii jest powszechne, państwowe, bezpłatne, podobnie jak w Polsce. Szkoła obowiązkowa trwa lat 9. To 6-letni cykl nauczania początkowego i 3-letni cykl drugiego stopnia, który zorientowany jest przedmiotowo. Trochę inaczej niż u nas, a podczas dzisiejszego spotkania porozmawiamy o tym, jakie elementy szkoły fińskiej moglibyśmy jako nauczyciele wprowadzić do polskiej szkoły, aby było w niej lepiej i naszym uczniom, i nam samym. Pani Marta Bujakowska, prowadząca dzisiejsze spotkanie, zajmuje się uczeniem języka angielskiego i pracą z nauczycielami od ponad 30 lat. Ciągle podnosi swoje kwalifikacje, bierze udział w wielu konferencjach organizowanych przez stowarzyszenia nauczycielskie w Polsce, w Europie i poza nią, gdzie dzieli się swoim doświadczeniem w formie prezentacji i warsztatów, a dziś mamy tę niewątpliwą przyjemność, abyśmy byli elementami czy też słuchaczami tegoż podziału. Dziś z nami pani Marta będzie dzielić się swoją wiedzą i doświadczeniem. Tradycyjnie zapraszam wszystkich do wpisywania się na listę obecności. Lista obecności za moment już, link będzie również udostępniony do tej listy na czacie. Przypominam, że uczestnictwo w 3 spotkaniach programu English Teaching i Instalink, które jest potwierdzone wpisem na liście obecności, daje Państwu możliwość uzyskania certyfikatu uczestnictwa w cyklu szkoleń. Wszystkich nauczycieli języka angielskiego, którzy są z nami, a pracują w małych miejscowościach, takich, które liczą do 20 000 mieszkańców lub w szkołach wiejskich, zapraszam również do zainteresowania się alternatywną ofertą programu English Teaching, a mianowicie uczestnictwem w warsztatach, których pierwsza edycja odbędzie się już w najbliższy weekend, w piątek i w sobotę. Warsztaty w małej, kameralnej grupie, w której można spotkać się i z programem English Teaching, i z bardzo ciekawymi trenerami. Szczegóły u nas na stronie internetowej i na Facebooku naszej fundacji www.englishteaching.org.pl. Zapraszamy. Nie przeciągając specjalnie długo, startujemy. Pani Marto, miłego wykładu życzę.
Dziękuję bardzo. Good evening, everybody. I have to say good evening because it's pitch dark outside, which is not very comfortable. But this is the season, this is the time which we have to survive. I count the days to the 23rd of December, to the equinox, and it's 37, maybe 36 days to go, because I don't really like the darkness. And also I'm in the dark because I can't see you. And as you know, and many of you know me, or we had worked together before the pandemics hit us, that I prefer the workshop format much more than a lecture. And this is like a lecture, especially because I'm talking to my screen. I don't even see my own face now. But we can manage. I'm sure we can manage because we are teachers. Today, we are going to talk about the Finnish model of education. I decided to talk about it because it's been my adventure for a long time. I have been to Finland, it was many years ago, and I visited a vocational school there where my friend's husband used to be a principal. And it was a novelty for me. It was like a school where the atmosphere was very friendly. And of course, I didn't understand a word of what they were saying, but the atmosphere was friendly and and warm even, but also within some limits. When the clock struck 3, because this is where till today the education finishes at 3 o'clock, everybody was ready to go home. Everybody put the coats on, put whatever they needed, hats or scarves, and were ready to go home. And I talked to this man, to the principal, and asked him about it, that everybody leaves at the same time. And he said, yeah, but why should we stay? We finish work at 3. So it doesn't look the same in our system, not only educational system, but in our country. We're going to talk about good things about the system, even though there are some criticism nowadays as well, because every system has to be reformed. We don't like our reforms, of course, or we call them deforms, I remember, and I agree. But we still need some reforms, because reforms should bring us progress. Some of our reforms seem to drag us back, and this is what we don't like. We want to go forward with our education. So in order to do it, we need to look around and see what are good things in different models and try to implement it in our country. Sometimes we need a system. Of course, we need a system, but sometimes we can implement little small elements without this system. On our own, in our schools, in our classrooms, starting from our classrooms, going into our schools, talking to our peer or our colleagues, and implementing different things in different schools. As it was mentioned, Finnish education is state finance only. It's public, well, not in British English, but it's state financed, and it is very proud of it. They say, why should we need private education at all? They don't have this stream at all. Okay, how I came to be interested in this topic. First, because I visited Finland some years ago, and then when I read, and I'm sure you read about it as well, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, with its program for international student assessment called PISA, which measures 15-year-olds' ability to use different skills like reading, mathematics, and science, or rather knowledge, also skills, to meet real-life challenges. And this is an interesting bit in it, because statistics don't always reflect reality, as we know, but we need them as a springboard to introducing change. When they say ability, and when they say meeting real-life challenges, I remember my first job. I had a teaching job before I went to university, and it was purely experimenting. But I want you now to remember your first lesson after you graduated, your first lesson, whether you taught English or whether you taught something else, maybe you changed the subject, whatever. But after you graduated as a teacher, you were fully qualified as a teacher, and you entered the classroom. I wonder, I give you 30 seconds to think, and of course I can't have any feedback from you, but hopefully you will write in chat and I will read it later. So 30 minutes to remember to picture yourself in front of your very first classroom. Okay, I can tell you my experience that I learned more from observing other teachers, like my teachers in high school or in language schools elsewhere, those who I considered very good and those who I consider not so good. And I didn't want to follow in their footsteps, but by mimicking, following, copying my teachers, I found my own way. When I was full of knowledge from, whatever grammar, contrastive or historic or whatever, even with subjects like so-called practical subjects, speaking, writing, reading, and listening, I didn't know what to do with this, with my classroom, because it's so far from a real life. And this is what Finnish education treats as priority, that they want their education to be as close to real life as possible, and the challenges their students are awaited. In 2000, so 20 years ago, PISA has involved more than 90 countries and economies. And of course, it's about 1/3 of all the countries. So it's a lot, but it's not that many. And 3 million students worldwide since 2000. Now we have 2020. We're going to have data from the previous year, as this year hasn't ended yet, and because of the COVID-19, it will be something different. They already have some ideas which I'm going to mention to you. Okay, so this is the first table I prepared from PISA results in December 2000. So we see Finland. Of course, we're not going to analyze the whole table. Finland in the first position for reading literacy. Finland in the 4th position for mathematical literacy, and 3rd position in scientific literacy. Look at Poland, because I wanted to compare it. We're comparing it to with our country. So Poland was down there below the average and below the 10th. They usually consider 10th the top 10. And in all, a little bit better, we were a little bit higher up the table in scientific literacy, which surprised me a lot, because I think that science is not really wonderfully taught in Poland. But I want to draw your attention also to English-speaking countries: Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Ireland. They're very high up to the top. And sometimes Ireland is only in reading literacy, but I think that New Zealand and Australia, Canada, who have very good educational systems or models, whatever you call it, they are far away from us. And that's why maybe we think they have different economy, different governments, different systems, and we just don't think of following them. The other thing is about what I think about us, that we sometimes see the good and we see the bad in some systems, but we find it difficult to follow, to grab, to hold to the good thing. We compare it in a negative way. For us, we would say, yeah, in New Zealand, they have long breaks, they have something, they play outside, and we don't. But we can introduce it little by little, step by step. And this is what I'm going to encourage you to do. Okay, this is the newest, the most recent version of PISA results, December last year. And here you have the difference, right? And it's a serious drop, especially in mathematics, because we don't see Finland in the top 10. But reading still and science is still high up. But which countries you see above Finland? East Asia, even in reading, because they're famous for being good at maths and sciences. But we also see Estonia. And Estonia took the Finnish model that was published, right? After the result was published, they tried to introduce it, and also they culturally, you can say, similar to Finland in some ways, which we are going to I'm going to mention later on. Because they also say it's not very easy, and you cannot replant one system from one culture to another culture. And of course we can't, even though we also have, well, more or less similar systems, like political systems, democracy, so-called democracy, but not everything is possible. Okay, so what's going to happen next with this PISA tests or assessment? In 2022, they're planning to focus on mathematics, as very often they do, but with an additional test of creative thinking, which is a new thing. And I'm almost sure that Finland is going to score higher up again, unless they do very badly at mathematics. We will see. But I'll be very interested in reading the results. And in 2000, I mean, they moved it, right? They moved it for 1 year. They delayed it for 1 year because of the COVID, and they want to examine also the results and reflect the post-COVID challenges. So PISA 2025 is planned to focus on science, right? And new assessment of foreign languages, which is a bingo. I've been waiting for it for a long time, because they assess everything but not languages. And we know how important it is. Of course, we are lucky. We are teachers of a lingua franca, but there are other foreign languages equally important, equally taught. I mean, equally well or badly taught. There's no difference. But they have never been assessed in a global scale, because I'm talking about global scale here. And to be honest, from the bottom of my heart, I'm optimistic about us. I think our result will not be low here. I don't know about the science or sciences, but with languages, I think we are really progressing. And it will also include the innovative domain of learning in the digital world. And I think it's very important, and the idea came up sort of now, as we were all in our comfort zones up till March last year, or this year, sorry, this last school year. I'm a teacher, so I think school years. When we got hit by the pandemic, and we were in a lockdown, and we had to suddenly start learning how to do it. How we had, I can't remember, 2-3 weeks to learn it. There was a lockdown, and then they introduced online learning, but teachers didn't know how to do it. Students didn't know how to do it. Parents didn't know how to do it, how to help their children. So it was really a very challenging, and very tiring time for us. And hence they want to check it now if we are learning something and also teaching this to our students. And here I want to mention InstaLink, because it's a great help in digital learning or e-learning. Oh, well, it's got many names, but you know what I mean. But also it corresponds with flipped classroom very much. This is the topic of my webinar 2 weeks ago. And I really recommend it and try to encourage people to try at least and try and check if you like it or not. But I think we will stay. The digital world will stay with us. We will have to work with it, not against it. Even those who don't like it, really don't like it, or say, oh, I'm too old to learn it, or things like that, it will not go away. So I recommend looking into it, before 2025 and try to share your knowledge with your students and teach them the new tools in order, of course, to score high. Okay, education in Finland. I think Jarek introduced it a little bit. Primary school is 9 years, but it's 6 and then 3, and it's divided in the way that one of the things is that you start school system, you start education at the age of 7, like in Poland now, and you cannot do it earlier when you're child or when you're 6 or 5. Maybe there are some exceptions of prodigy children, but I don't know about it. So you have the same teacher for 6 years, and this is the big difference. I think it's the one of the biggest, definitely. 6 years. For 6 years, you have one teacher who teaches you everything. Who teaches you English language or whatever language, teaches you nature, primary education at first, but then after 3 years, they have to be. That's why it's very demanding to become a teacher in Finland. It's one of the reasons, because you have to be really versatile. And after 6 years, you have subject teachers for different subjects, and this is a little bit different. It's like in Poland from grade 4, I think now. We had the attempt, our government had many attempts to reform our system, and as I mentioned before, we do need reforms, but the reforms were from top to bottom without consultation, proper consultation, I think, and it didn't work out, and it made really, it caused havoc in our system. Now I think we are getting out of it, but we still have these classes with those students who started at the age of 6 and those who started at the age of 7, and they're still behind. You can see it, many experienced and primary teachers especially, they can see the difference, and I think it was unfair to the teachers but also to the students. And then they came back, because we are in it, we came back to the previous form of starting school at the age of 7. Then we have high school. It reminds me of the system before last year, right, or 2 years ago, when we had 6 years, 3 years, and 3 years. But here, everything happened in one school first. There was no like middle school, like gymnasium. And then you choose when you finish your primary school, you choose whether you want to go to upper secondary school and go on the path of studying at university, getting a degree, university degree, or you go after upper secondary, you go to polytechnic, which is an equivalent of our Szkoła pomaturalna, which don't exist anymore, unfortunately. I think some of them were not bad, especially teacher training colleges. I really valued them highly, and I cry over them because they taught more practical things. Okay, and then if you choose to go to a vocational school, you go into polytechnic later on if you want to follow your education where you learn skills, and it's like close to life, to real life, you would say. It's less academic, so to speak. So people, students who are lower achievers at school, I mean intellectually, because they may be high achievers talking about skills, they would probably choose this path. Okay, now we're going into I'm going to try to answer this question, what makes Finnish school so good? And I've selected 10 points. They could be more or less. It depends how you look at it. So first, And the most important, and I think people who observe this educational system agree that the first thing is no standardized tests. As we know, in the United States of America, probably you know because through the subject we teach, we're close to it and we have the interest in their culture. They have standardized tests. They introduced them. They were very proud of them. And they test everything. They test everything. They test schools. They test and evaluate teachers. They evaluate and assess students and principals and vice principals, and everybody who can be tested is tested. And I think we complain very often that what is our first complaint? Everybody. We have no time. Right? We all say we have no time. I cruelly often say that I'm not sure if I agree, because all humans have the same time, 24 hours a day. And the only thing is that we have problems with managing this time given to us. I think we spend too much time on testing. I mean, as it is done now, because we can do tests online. Our students can test themselves. With the help of technology, we can save time for really teaching. Also, what's the difference? Because when I was at school, and I believe many of you, we didn't have any standardized tests. We had our matriculation exam designed by our teachers for us and assessed and marked by our teachers, which is shocking. When I talk to young people, sometimes they're shocked. Even my son and my daughter, they had my elder son and elder daughter, they had this matriculation exam done by the school, and the younger kids, they had standardized matriculation exam with the outside examiners, outside designers of the tests, who are not necessarily practicing teachers, but of course they're educators working for education authorities. They design our exams or tests, and not only matriculation, but we had this middle school exam and this so-called sprawdzian ósmoklasisty, which was, it made me laugh when they introduced this name. It was like quizzes in the United States instead of tests, right? And it's only, like sugaring it a little bit, because it's the same thing and it brings the same stress. So now they assessed elsewhere, of course, by the examiners, and I see the advantage is for the teachers who are examiners, and they can have an extra income at the beginning of holiday or at the end of the school year. So maybe this is the advantage. But apart from it, it's standardization, which some people may agree with it, but they say that it makes Finnish school good because they don't have any standardized tests. They have entrance exams, though, like we used to. If you want to study at the university, you have to take an entrance test. And they also say that many people drop out, or they don't find the right place, and it's a waste of time for them, for those who want to study and can't find a place at the university they want to study at. But I hear from university teachers, tertiary teachers in Poland, that they wish we could go back to entrance exams, because they have students now who are not up to the level, or up to their requirements. So because there is no, I think, compatibility between our standardized matriculation exam and what is required in the first year of university. Okay, accountability for teachers, not required. Not required in one way, in one sense, that they don't need to be checked. They're highly educated, as I mentioned a little bit before, and they're absolutely trusted. They're trusted by the students, they're trusted by the parents. You will have some examples of it. They're trusted by the system, they're trusted by the authorities. It is very difficult to get a place in a university in so-called pedagogical departments. The exams are tough, and they're proud that they need to have masters, but it's the same in Poland, right? In some countries, like in Anglo-Saxon countries, in English-speaking countries, and many other European and non-only European countries, you don't need to have an MA. You may be a bachelor, but still you have to be. You have to have qualifications for teaching, or in the States you need certification for teaching, which also is not very easy to get. But because they chose it, now the interesting thing is that it's easier to get a place in a law or medical school than in a pedagogical department, which is like unheard of in our country. Of course, we also say that sometimes it's like negative selection. People say, yeah, I don't know what to study. Okay, I go and study some kind of pedagogy. I'm not saying that everybody do it, but many, we know many cases like that. So, coming back, sorry. When you talk that accountability is not required, I want to mention that they cooperate. They cooperate with each other. I mean, teachers. I think, generally speaking, unlike in our schools, again, we don't have time for it, but there is little cooperation in our schools. I saw it in British schools, in English schools, which I visited with other teachers from different countries. And for example, there is a school where you have, I think everybody knows the system in Britain. So it was a primary school, 6 years, and let's say that in class 6, they had 4 groups in a year, in one given year, and maths teachers of sixth form, they would 6 group, they would gather together at the end of the school year, when students already go on holiday, but they don't have the holiday yet. It's the same as in Poland, but we have so-called duty hours where you have to come to school, but we don't have to stay at school, and they have to come to school, or they may do it in some other place, but they work together and they design the whole plan for the next year. So if there are 4 of them, like in this school I mentioned in Canterbury, one would do PowerPoints, the other would make sure that it's compatible with the national curriculum, what they're doing. Some others would reach out and find special materials, depending on the subject they teach. And they create something together. And then we went from one class to another where they were teaching the same thing. So they had the same slides, or they used the same book for reading, but they still did it in a different way because their personalities came into the picture, right? So the lessons were not the same, but they could learn from each other so much. Of course, it doesn't mean that they were friends. It doesn't mean that. I'm not talking about friendship. I'm talking about cooperation and being true colleagues who support each other. And there is a lot of it in the Finnish educational system. Cooperation, not competition. It applies to the classroom as well. They are very much for cooperation, and I don't want to say against, but they are not for. They don't support competition very much. Of course, they have games and they have PE where they play and they compete, but it's not the point, right? The point is that when they work in teams and they do a lot of group work, they do. When they come to school, they use the time. It reminds me of flipped classroom. But it is not necessarily. But they come to school and they have a project to make, or they have to create some web portfolio or a blog or whatever. They have to go into outside and create something with nature, like with dry leaves, and collect them and create something in fine arts or something like that. They do it in cooperation, not competing. And also this can be introduced more in our schools. I know that you use group work and teamwork as well, or pair work. But I think we can focus on it more, because this is, I think, we can introduce. We can't change our testing system, but we can change. Somebody said, I can't remember who, if you want to change something, you have to start from yourself. So if you choose some bits from this model that suit you, you can try to change a little bit even tomorrow, even though it's difficult because we are in this online teaching still. And next thing is make the basics a priority. And I think we don't know how to do it. Sometimes I think we don't know how to do it. Because we have, let's say we have a course book, right? A course book for English, for teaching English. We look at it and we know, because the course books we use are approved by our government or Ministry of Education. So we know that we can teach from this book with no problems, with no doubt. But I think we're not critical enough. We look at the book and we say, yeah, okay, so I go page by page and just do the teaching. Or page by page or unit by unit or whatever way. I'm not saying that we all do it this way, but you can pick some things from the book in different order, and we feel safe. But what's the priority for our students? When we think of their life and we think what challenges are awaiting them when they finish school, they should be able to communicate in English, shouldn't they? I repeat it many times. I've been repeating it maybe too many times, that we're not teaching future linguists. We are teaching future users of English. And if you think this, it was my own way. I'm talking about my own path. When you think of it all the time, you say, okay, do we really need this? This is required at the exam. Okay, so you openly say to your students, this is not very important for us, and or even sometimes students say or write something and you say, yeah, actually it is in English, people say it. But it would not be accepted in the exam. As you know, exams are assessed by computers sometimes, some of them, right? When you have multiple choice or something like that, and there is only one answer which is considered correct. You should be open. I mean, we have to be open with our students and say, okay, we are in the same boat. I teach you for this test. You have to take this test. But I am a teacher of English. I'm not a teacher for testing only. So choose the priority, and basics must be priority. So for them, it's communication with other students, okay? And sometimes we neglect it because we are so focused on teaching a subject, our subject, that we forget that school is not only for teaching subjects. Some teachers even say it. I'm not going to bring them up. I teach them. Okay. But then you teach humans and they are going into the world, and you may teach them a lot of things that are not included in the course book of any subject. And I think it's a gift for them from us. We mentioned it, right? So they say that this is the success is because they start school at an older age. There is a big debate. It's criticized by England. It's criticized by the United States, where they all start earlier, much earlier in England, 4.5 years, when you can start school. Of course, it looks more like a kindergarten, but still it's a school. In France as well, I think they start pretty early. They start something like kindergarten that is not obligatory, but almost everybody send their children at the age of 2.5. For me, it's much too early, but it's my personal opinion. Maybe I am too old for this system, because I think that a little child needs the mother and the father and sisters and brothers, siblings and grandparents. And then when they are stronger, then can go into the world. And also very young children don't play in teams. They play on their own. But maybe, I don't know, maybe intellectually it's got its value. I always said that the verdict, the sentence was shorter for Finnish children, and it sounded negative. But I'm in it. I'm a teacher, and I taught in primary school, so I know, right? I'm not criticizing something that is far there. I'm trying to reflect on where we are and how to improve it. Next is providing professional options past a traditional college degree. So again, they would provide this vocational path or stream, and it's unlike, it's highly respected, because I think they liquidated our Szkoła Zawodowa. I mean, wyższe, yes, but just Szkoła Zawodowa after primary school. And it was never respected. Generally in our educational system, vocational education was not seen as something or not seen as important as the other part of education, more academic, right? We were talking about education, primary school, middle or upper, upper secondary, and then university. Now we also have college and university. Now they've brought vocational schools back, and because I've been always interested in education and such, and I also had friends in so-called, it's a little place like curatorium, but in my hometown, I've forgotten how delegatura, right, it was called. And I had friends working there, and they were visiting teachers for vocational schools, and they told me wonderful stories about those schools, the teachers there, the students as well. And I also had practicing teachers from the States, and I found placement for them. This was my job, to find placement for them in our schools. And I found vocational school who wanted them, and it gave me an opportunity to observe classes there and spend some time in the schools. And I really think this is what we need more of, I think. So this is also what they aim for in their education. And we only say it, right? I heard it many times. I'm sorry, I'm going back to it. I've heard it many times, but it was rather said in a sarcastic way, like to a student, if you don't study, you're going to a vocational school. Then it's a bit disrespectful. So it's much worse, right? You grade it in a way, right? You rank it, and it's worse than going to high school. It's not worse, it's just different. And we all need skillful people. Okay, Finns wake up later for less strenuous school days. Yeah. They have classes from 8:30 or 9, and as I mentioned before, they leave school at 3. Little ones, they have fewer classes. They have the system of common room as well, so they can stay at school and play as much as they want, and they are looked after. But they have not more than 4 to 5 lessons per day. A lesson is also 45 minutes, like in Poland. Between the lessons, they go out. Usually they go outside to play. And this is something that I've been trying to introduce and that I've been trying to encourage people, but I haven't been successful so far, because we were trying to introduce it, going outside. My grandchildren go to a state school, but it's a small school with a big, huge playground, really beautiful yard, sports ground. But they go out not very often. And my daughter went to the school to talk about it, to let the kids outside. But the problem is not with the school. The problem is more serious. It's the parents, the school, the teachers, the parents who say, okay, I don't want my child to play outside because he may catch a cold, he or she. And then it's very, very difficult. And this is the culture. This is our culture. And this is what I mentioned, what I was talking about before, that you cannot replant one system into another place. You can only take bits and pieces. This is in the Finnish culture. They air their newborn babies, and they say if it is minus 20 or 25, they cover something. They cover their prams with something, a little. But if it's minus 20, they still air the kids, of course, well wrapped up, but they sleep, they have their naps outside. Well, in Poland, I don't think so. So we may leave this for later time, but I would still try to encourage schools to give this opportunity to students to spend more time outside. Of course, again, if we have 10 minutes break in winter, it's not possible. It's not possible that they can get dressed and go outside. When you have half an hour, of course you can do it. Or the longest breaks, I think, in Poland are 20 minutes. And this is usually lunch break where kids eat their lunches. So I don't know. I don't have the ready-made recipe for it, but we may think about it, okay? And I would like you to think about it, because I think there's nothing better than a fresh air for the kids. Okay, this I mentioned is very consistent at the beginning. For 6 years, they have very consistent instruction. They have the same teacher, and the teacher is right. They call the teachers by their first name, which in Poland, again, it's culturally distant. I know some schools, and I taught in schools where students called us by our first name, and it was fine, but I think it's not very important how they call you. Now, more and more often, they call you with pani and your first name, or pan and your first name, which I quite like. It's friendly, but very respectful. And I think they stopped, or they're stopping calling you pani professor, pani professorze in high school, which I really detested, because I wasn't a professor. I know it's customary, I know it's a tradition, but still didn't like it, because it made the distance much bigger. And I personally, I didn't want that big distance between me and my students. So this comes to the educational system further, like at university, tertiary level, because our education is subject, right, or primary education, or subject teachers. So we would have to make a revolution to do it. But we're not as bad if we think this is good, right? So we're not as bad because for 3 years at least we have one teacher. Sometimes we have plus English teacher or plus PE teacher or plus some other teacher who is a specialist in a given subject. In the States, they have it completely upside down. They have standardized testing and they have no consistent instruction. I mean, they do, but for 1 year only. Every year you have a different teacher. So again, you specialize in teaching 3rd grade or 4th or 6th grade, and you teach them all the subjects, everything that the curriculum brings. So again, it may be positive or negative. It depends. It's very different. I don't think it's positive or negative. It's very, very different. Sometimes it may be good for the students if they don't like the teacher, a given teacher, and also it's good for the teacher if he or she doesn't like this particular class very much. Okay, it's a more relaxed atmosphere. As I mentioned, they call their teachers by their first names. They work in teams. The teachers monitor a lot. They walk about the classrooms. They sit in rows only only when they watch something, for example, or when they listen to something. Yeah, usually with video. Otherwise, they sit at their workstation, as they call them, and they work in their teams. Of course, they can be allocated by the teams, maybe allocated by the teacher. It's up to the teacher. Teachers are trusted, and they say they know what they're doing. I mean, our teachers also know what they're doing, but they're not trusted, and it's not reflected in the salaries as well, which we all know. But on the positive side, I may mention that it's better. My mother was a high school teacher, and I remember that in 1979, I think, or 8, she earned the equivalent of $20 a month. So, okay, we can say that we're making progress, but it's, of course, in a joking way. They also have less homework, and outside work is not required from them. It is, because I read a lot about their system as well, and in some sources they say there's no homework in Finland. It's not true. It's not true about England either. There is homework, but not as much. Like in England and also in Finland, students, especially young pupils, they have to do the reading at home, but they have to read 1 or 2 lines, right? Just to practice a little bit more in the afternoon. Okay, here is something for you to read, and it will give a rest to my voice. It's from the parent, quite recently written. And I haven't corrected any mistakes. Okay, I hope you finished reading. I also heard about Denmark, that princesses' children, they were a son and daughter, and they started their education in a public school, but then they decided to take them to a private school. Maybe not, I don't know if it was elite school, but to a private school because of the journalists, because of the paparazzis who never left them alone, and the private school was closed, locked for the public, and they didn't have access to their children. But still, they're very democratic states, Scandinavia, I mean. Okay, so summing up, Finland is leading the way because of common sense practices. And this is what I think we all have common sense, well developed, but we sometimes forget it and we want to follow somebody else's directives. And of course we have to, I know we have to, I know where I live. But when you use your common sense and you say, okay, this is more important, do it, follow it, because you will do better for your students and yourself, you'll feel much better. And also holistic teaching environment. This comes with the culture. We're starting as well. We're starting. We had this, how you called it, międzyprzedmiotowe ścieżki międzyprzedmiotowe. Now CLIL is coming into being more and more often. We call it bilingual education. Well, I'm going to talk about it in 2 weeks' time. And it's also leading because of positive culture and mindset towards education. This is really, really a big problem because we don't have this positive culture to education and to teachers, towards teachers. Unfortunately, we are treated not as professionals, but as workers. It's treated as not so much as a profession, but rather as a job. I love my job, by the way. Okay, teaching methods as well. I mentioned about them before, so I'm not going to go into it. We do it too, and we can copy more. And passionate and well-trained teachers. And I think Poland is full of passionate and well-trained teachers, because if you were not, you would leave the profession a long time ago, probably. Okay, one more thing. We can be, in our profession still, we can be craftsmen or craftspersons, should I say, to be politically correct, or we can be artists. And there is no difference, in my opinion, because you can be a good artist or a good craftsman, and you would still be excellent in your place. But if you're a bad artist, it's better to be a good craftsman, or if you're a bad craftsman, try to be a good artist. Because then, in both ways, you will really change lives of your students. Thank you very much for your attention. Here is my resources. I think they would be available to you. I don't know how it works, but I highly recommend the last thing. It is on YouTube, but it's a TED Talk. If you type Finnish school and TED Talk, probably you will have it. It's a former student of 2 systems, of Finnish system and of Singaporean system, which I think is closer to ours than to Finnish. So it is interesting because she went through both systems. Thank you very much.
Dziękujemy bardzo. Może Pani wyłączyć teraz swoją prezentację, tak żebyśmy się wzajemnie widzieli.
Tak.
I zapraszamy do zadawania pytań. Jeżeli macie Państwo jakieś pytania i mamy jeszcze chwilę, aby spróbować na nie odpowiedzieć.
A czy w czacie coś było? Albo jakąś listę uczestników?
Oprócz listy uczestników oczywiście było trochę pytań. W tym między innymi...
Było, hello, is there any chance for foreigners to get a job as a teacher in Finland? You have to speak Finnish. It is a chance. You can. They mostly they're nationals of Finland because they also say that they have very low immigration, 2 point something. I can't remember the exact number, and because of the Finnish language being difficult and the weather, right? That's why they're nationals. But I think you could get a job there, but with fluent Finnish. It's the same in Israel. People ask me about Israel, and it's the same problem. You have to speak Hebrew.
Dziękujemy bardzo Pani Marto za bardzo ciekawe wystąpienie dzisiaj. Widzę, że pytania się raczej nie pojawiają.
Może wszystko było jasne.
Jednak jest.
programs which may allow students exchanges with Finland. I don't know. I think maybe NIDA could start something because we had some, attempts to it. Now, it's really hard. You could, I don't know, I think you could apply, you could write to Finnish Ministry of Education to direct you to a school, and they would probably respond. If you get in touch with a school, you can get into exchange. Student exchange is now out of the question, of course, for the time being, but you can have pen pals, or you can, thanks to the technology, we can have classes together even. There are programs who do voluntary classes but I know them in African countries.
Dziękujemy bardzo raz jeszcze za bardzo fajne, ciekawe 60 minut, które mogliśmy razem spędzić. Do zobaczenia za tydzień i do usłyszenia, choć niekoniecznie zobaczenia, bo to tak trochę w jedną stronę.
My wszyscy się widzimy.
Ale jeżeli byście Państwo chcieli widzieć się i słyszeć wzajemnie podczas warsztatów w mniejszej grupie, zapraszamy do zapisywania się na takie warsztaty na stronie www.englishteaching.org.pl i już w najbliższy weekend startujemy z pierwszą serią. Myślę, Pani Marto, że może i z Panią moglibyśmy się zobaczyć w takiej bardziej kameralnej grupie.
Pięknie, bo ja wiem,
którzy mogliby rozmawiać również z Panią na bieżąco.
Bardzo chętnie bym to zrobiła na pewno, ponieważ wiem, że miały być jakieś takie nawet face to face, no ale to nie wyszło ze względu na wzrost zakażeń, więc wszystko zostało przeniesione online'owo, ale tak, jak najbardziej, oczywiście. Będę na pewno rozmawiać.
Czujemy się umówieni. Do zobaczenia w najbliższej przyszłości. Dziękujemy
bardzo. Dziękuję.
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia.